There are plenty of videos on the internet that talks about the proper mindset you need to have to be a successful investor, but I haven't seen any videos on the internet that talks about the mindset you need to have to be a successful and profitable yield farmer. And there is a difference. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the proper mindset you need to have to be a successful yield farmer so you can take advantage of the best passive income generating opportunities in the history of mankind and use it as another tool on your investing tool belt. All right. So in this video, we're going to talk about the mindset you need to have. We're going to give some examples. We're going to dive into what yield farming is if you don't already know what it is. We're going to cover everything. All right. So before we get started, I do have to say this video should not be taken as financial advice. Please consult with your financial advisor before making any investment decisions. This video is for your education purposes only. All right. So now without further ado, let's get into the content. So guys, first off, before we even start on the mindset you need to have, what is yield farming? So yield farming is the act of staking your crypto assets to facilitate whatever that platform is facilitating. There are four main ways so you can get a yield, and that yield is usually passive. All right. The first way is through staking. So like, for example, let's say you want to get a yield and you want to stake on the ETH beacon chain. You basically are getting a yield because you're helping to secure the network. All right. The second way is to facilitate insurance premiums. So you can go to a website like Nexus Mutual, and by staking your assets, people trust that you are looking at premiums honestly, and if not, there's a penalty. The third way is to facilitate borrowing and lending. All right, so you can go on a platform like Aave or Compound or Maker, and you could supply assets, and then people come on the platform to borrow, and they're borrowing your assets, and you get paid a premium for that. You get paid a passive income premium. The fourth way, my favorite way, and the most profitable way, is to stake your tokens on exchanges, specifically decentralized exchanges, in the form of pairs, so you can get paid a passive income whenever the tokens you deposited into a pool are getting traded. So for example, let's say you stake in an ETH USDC pool on Uniswap. Whenever people go on Uniswap and they're using that pool with your fee tier, whatever your percentage is in the overall pool is the percentage of the trading fees you get. So for example, if there's $100,000 in a pool and you put 5K ETH, 5K USDC, you have $10,000 in deposited liquidity, which makes up 10% of that pool, which means you get 10% of the trading fees. Now, going a step further, there's something called concentrated liquidity, right? And this is new to crypto, but it's not new in the traditional financial world. Basically, concentrated liquidity allows you to stake token pairs on a decentralized exchange and decide which price you want your liquidity to be used for. It makes your capital more efficient. For example, going back to ETH USDC, if you think ETH is going to trade between the price of 2,000 to 3,000, you can deposit your liquidity on there and say, hey, only use my liquidity when the price is between 2 and 3,000. The more narrow your range, the higher your risk, but the higher your passive income. And the opposite when you have a wide range. So there's always a trade-off. Okay, so now that we know what yield farming is, first, before you can start yield farming, you do need to have the proper mindset of a successful investor. And I'm not going to cover everything here. We cover all that stuff in our course. Visit Know It Outside XYZ and book a free strategy session if you're interested. But the two main things is you want to invest into what you understand only. All right. And this is fundamental analysis. So when you're conducting proper fundamental analysis, you need to be able to look at the tokenomics. You need to be able to look at the team. You need to be able to make sure the protocol is audited and it's safe. You need to look at what problem they're solving and how they stack up against their competitors. You need to see if this problem is worth even being solved. Is it a hair on fire problem? Do people really care to have this problem solved, or is it just kind of cool? Like, these are things you need to be able to conduct when you're doing fundamental analysis. So investing in what you understand is the first thing. The second thing is having a plan to get out before you get in. You hear Warren Buffett buying a stock. He said, I'm not selling it ever. Like, he probably just borrows against his stock and use it to buy more stock. And, he's really confident in his fundamental analysis, so he isn't super diversified. And I made a video on diversification if you want to check that out. I dove into everything you need to know regarding it, how diversified you should be, and how it's kind of bullshit based off of what most people say. Another part of having a profit-taking plan is to be able to conduct proper technical analysis, chart mastery. So fundamental analysis says, hey, this is a good thing to buy. Technical analysis helps you master your entries and your exits, because These two things put together make you a really good investor. Some people swear only by the technicals, some people only swear by the fundamentals, but I think it's good to know how to do both, right? It's important to be able to look at major liquidity zones, support and resistance, trends, like all these different things, because when you're looking at a chart, you're essentially looking at people's fear and greed. Like all of the things that the market is pricing in, it shows on the chart. All right, so being able to conduct proper technical analysis is extremely important. So once you get the hang of those two things, then and only then can you be a successful yield farmer, in my opinion. It's kind of like basketball. Before you learn how to even shoot with two hands, you're supposed to go under the rim and just shoot with one. Work on shooting with one, and then you bring your guide hand up, and then you start to learn to shoot with two. And then you start learning how to just catch and shoot, catch and shoot, catch and shoot. And then after that, then you start doing moves where you can pull up off the dribble. But if you don't have the actual form, you're going to be pulling up off the dribble and your form is going to be terrible. It's the same thing with investing. You want to learn the fundamentals first and learn these things in chronological order so that they can build off of each other. Okay, so now that we've talked about that, let's talk about some mindsets that you need to have as a yield farmer. The first thing to know is that yield farming is not the end all be all. It is just a tool on your investing tool belt, and it deserves a certain section in your portfolio. You shouldn't be yield farming with all of your whole entire portfolio. And let me explain. So in a standard crypto portfolio, you'll hear people talk about they have a percentage in Bitcoin, they have a percentage in ETH, a percentage in altcoins, a percentage in cash, but most people just stop there. I also have a certain percentage of my portfolio specifically dedicated just for yield farming. All right, so now that you have a certain percentage dedicated for yield farming, how do you think about that certain percentage? Let's talk about that. Now, like I said in the beginning of the video, yield farming, I believe, done right, is the best way to generate passive income in the history of mankind. Like, it's not even close unless you know how to build an algo, which 99.9% of people don't. Even if you do, you're going to have to lose money and F up for a while because building an algo is hard and you have to test it before it's refined. And the market's always changing, so your algos are always going to be changing as well. This is unlike any other thing that portfolios has ever seen before, because usually market making can only be done by market makers in traditional finance, people who are providing liquidity for exchanges. Decentralized exchanges are new. So everyday people like you and I can be market makers. That was never the case. And market makers have been around since the stock market or securities inception. So some people would try to say it's kind of like bonds because it offers fixed rate or a annual percentage rate, an APY or an APR. But it's not like bonds because you have to actually buy the bond to get it. While you do have to buy the tokens you're yield farming with, it's not a fixed rate. It changes with volatility. While bonds are heavily affected by interest rates, and the crypto market as well, which makes it indirectly affected by interest rates, but the bond market is directly affected by interest rates. That's not the case for yield farming. And even if you go towards TIPS, which stands for Treasury Inflated Protected Securities, these are bonds where the yield moves with the inflation rate. So as inflation is going up, the yield's going up so that you can still get a yield that's on par with inflation. And as it goes down, the yield goes down as well. The closest thing to yield farming is actually trading options. And we teach how to trade options within our course as well. But that's the closest thing. Even still, though, it's not quite the same exact thing as options, too. It's a lot of similarities, but market making is completely different, guys. It's completely different. So just getting back to having a section of your portfolio blocked off just for yield farming, let's talk about how I like to think of that, right? I like to think of this as money I want working for me, like little soldiers going home to bring home more bacon so that it can either add to the cash portion of my portfolio, it can add to the altcoin portion, like however my portfolio is structured, I want the yield farming set aside so that it can help increase that, right? So with my pools, and this is another mindset shift that you need to have as a yield farmer. A lot of people, I made a video titled the top 6 mistakes that yield farmers make. And if you just avoid those mistakes, your chances to succeed as a yield farmer go up exponentially. So definitely give that video a watch if you haven't. But one of the things I talked about is having a long-term time preference. For me, it's usually either multi-month or multi-year. Like there are pools that I've been in that haven't went out of range once that's still paying me over 50% APR that I've been in for over a year, over 2 years. the reason why you want to have a long-term time preference is because if you just look at high yields, you will most likely lose to impermanent loss. Like there are times where you can get lucky. If you found like Shiba ETH, you could have made back your principal with a pretty wide range within like 2 to 3 months, but that's extremely rare and it's not a sustainable model. However, in the long run, impermanent loss, it can actually end up being your BFF. Like if you know what you're doing, you actually want impermanent loss. And there are certain strategies to where the higher your impermanent loss, the higher the success of that strategy. And I made a video on this whole concept on how to turn impermanent loss into your best friend. Give that a watch as well if you haven't. But the reason why is because you can accumulate assets and sell them at higher prices later versus you going out of range and then you're like impermanent loss and then you just exit out of the pool and the price goes back up and you would have been even. Like you really just have to be patient. So let's go over a real world example. Let's say I have a $100,000 crypto portfolio and I have 20% Bitcoin, 30% cash, 25% altcoins, 5% set aside for high risk altcoins, and then 20% set aside for yield farming. Now, let's talk about why it's good when you look at this through a long-term lens. So one of the pools that I'm in right now is Maple ETH, and I made a video on how you can turn $15,000 into $1 million invested into maplefinance. Definitely give that video a watch if you haven't. I covered my yield farming strategy at the end, but I'm going to use that pool as an example. Let's say I have a $20,000 position, right? And let's say last time I checked, I was getting 124% APR on the pool. But I want to do easy math. So let's say I have 20K and I'm making 100% APR. And let's say I made 100% in a year, right? Because I made 100% APY more or less within that year. Sometimes it'll be more, sometimes it'll be down. But on average, let's say I made 100% APR. And let's say I took my rewards and just left them in my wallet or sent them into another wallet and I used them to buy more Maple, which is what I'm doing, instead of compounding my rewards. That's when impermanent loss can kind of mess you up. Well, it depends on your strategy, but I typically like to take my rewards because like I said, I look at mine as little soldiers, bringing home more bacon to add to my portfolio. Maple is a section in my portfolio and I want to accumulate more so I can buy more so I can have more to sell. Now, throughout that year, as I made 100% APR, I'm going to experience some impermanent loss because the price isn't going to stay the same. So sometimes it can represent, and this depends on how wide or narrow you set your range, and also depends upon how the other portion of your portfolio is performing. But there will be certain times where it can represent 10 to 30% of your portfolio, but that doesn't matter. Remember, this section is for yield farming. It's for working. So sometimes it's going to be more, sometimes it's going to be less. So let's say you were in this pool for a year and you made your 100% in Maple, and then you were just taking your ETH and you're buying more Maple, or you're turning it into USDC, which is an even better idea, and you're waiting for the Maple price to go down to buy more because you want to, lower your average buy-in price. Well, guys, after a whole year, now you accumulated all of your money back. So now you're literally yield farming with house money. And you made this for free. Now let's go over the math. Let's say you were getting 124% APR, because I want to really drive this home. So I'm gonna even make it even more conservative. Let's say you were getting 124% APR for 6 months. And let's say Maple does a 100x in 6 months, which it very well could, right? I am expecting it to do 100x from the current prices, and I talked about that in the video and why. And we made another video on Maple that goes in depth into like what makes it valuable and why we think that. So we have 2 videos. So you have to go to Know It Out to get the other one, and definitely subscribe if you haven't. But if you accumulate Maple at 100% APR and 100x's in 6 months, let's say your 12K is, you add 50%. So now you just accumulated an extra $6,000 in Maple tokens for free, right? Not including buying the dips. Let's just keep the example really cut and dry here. That means you can turn, if you have your take profit strategy set up for Maple, and it's the one that I did in the video, that means you can turn that 6K you accumulated for free into around 3 to 450K. And this is why we say combining yield farming with trading done correctly will for sure maximize your profits. And I made a video on how to do that as well. Guys, if you like this kind of content, click the link in the description and book a free strategy session with one of our team members if you want to get access to our elite community, as well as our Know It All Academy. We go through all the things you need to do in order to rewire your brain and develop the mindset of a successful investor and yield farmer. We have a chart mastery section, which teaches you how to look at a chart so you can master your entries and your exits. Bonafide security practices so you can minimize your chances of being hacked. I've been in crypto since 2017 and I have not been hacked once. I've been a part of some rugs, but I've never been hacked. And then we have our intro to yield farming, as well as our advanced yield farming section that teaches you every strategy that you need to know, so that way you can pick one that resonates with your personality, your goals, and your lifestyle. After going through the course, you get access to our world-class coaches who are professionals at what they do. So like I said, if that interests you, click the link in the description, book a free strategy session, and we look forward to hearing from you. But guys, with that, I hope you got value from this video, and I hope you realize that the mindset you have to anything, whether it's sports or investing or your job or your relationship, your mindset is the most important thing. Everything flows and comes after that. So I hope you got value. If you did, I ask that you consider subscribing, drop a like, drop a comment. Let me know what you want me to cover next. But with that, I thank you guys so much for tuning in. I love every single one of you, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care and trade safe.